Hi, I'm Sonia from Flying Parrot Photography. Have you ever been to a new location to look for birds, only to get there and A, not be able to find any birds, and B, not really come home with any good shots? Bird photography can be super frustrating. We all have an off day every now and then, but there are things you can do to improve your chances of seeing birds and come home with some good shots. So today I'm going to share my best bird stalking techniques, what you should do before you even leave home, how to scout for a good location, and what to look for when you get there to optimize your photography. So what does make a good birding location? For me, I like to have a good high species count. It needs to be accessible. I'm not really one to walk for miles and miles, and it needs to have good photogenic elements. And we're going to talk more about that later. I do want to bust a little myth here. You don't have to go to exotic and faraway places to be a bird photographer. I've taken some really great shots, just meters from busy highways in nowhere destinations. And remember, it's always better to get a great shot of an everyday bird than it is to get an average shot of something exotic. What your destination, just 15 minutes of research can save you hours of frustration and increase your chances of coming home with some great bird shots. So you might be familiar with my first tip, which is to visit eBird.com. It's a citizen science website run by the world famous Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Oh, that's a mouthful. If you don't have an eBird account, I recommend that you sign up for this valuable free resource. Now, eBird does have a lot of information and I find I can get a little bit lost in there at times, so I like to keep it simple. I hit the Explore tab, then I go to Explore Hotspots, and then I either use the search bar to browse for a particular location or just use the map to zoom in on an area that I'm thinking of visiting. Often you'll find several hotspots in close proximity, which gives you a chance to click on the details and find out what the species count is there a particular bird that you're searching for, and which is a better place to take photos. Browsing through recent photo uploads can also be really helpful. Remember that eBird is really popular with bird watchers, not just bird photographers, so some of the information may not be particularly relevant. It's still a really useful tool. So once I've chosen my location, usually via the hotspots on eBird, I then jump on over to Google Maps and I use the Layers tool to search for my location, which brings up the satellite imagery. Now here's where I'm going to share my really secret tip. So I look for tracks to go down looking for birds, but not walking tracks. I try and look for vehicle access trails that are usually clearly visible on the satellite images. They may go to water, they may go around the campground, they might be fire trails or lead to some kind of infrastructure. And often they're not entirely for public consumption, but you usually don't have too much trouble walking along them. Now, the advantage with heading down these kinds of trails is that you have a much wider view. There's a lot more scope to see birds and a lot more scope to approach them. I find walking trails are often too tightly knit, and sometimes I can't even see over the sides, let alone find any birds. Fire trails and tracks under power lines are really great for this, and often they're cut through quite thick scrub, so what you have is a scenario of birds coming across, and it gives you a great chance to really get a good shot of them without being stuck too tightly in the foliage. Now, if you can combine some of these fire trails with a little water source that you've maybe spotted on the satellite images, you're in for birding gold. And now another little myth I'd like to bust is you don't have to walk for miles and miles to faraway places to get birds. Often birds congregate around human activity with the water and the food sources that they bring. Once I spent a week trying to find regent bowerbirds in the national park, trekking for miles and miles, and finally I found one on the last day of my stay in that area, and it was 200 meters from the campground, almost in town. So the next real useful bit of research is the weather. What are the expected temperature ranges and what kind of conditions are forecast for the day? I personally try and avoid windy conditions. I find it's really hard to hear birds when there's wind howling, and your ears are a very close second to your eyes when you're looking for birds. If you're fortunate, there's going to be overcast conditions forecast for your day of birding. To me, that is the optimum. I just love overcast days. There's not that time pressure to get the good light, and often you can just go birding all day, and who wouldn't love that? Now, hot, sunny, dry conditions are a little bit more of a challenge. You really do need to set that alarm early. And also true for if you're going to photograph near bodies of water. So as the sun rises, it brings with it increasing glare, reflection and contrast, as well as annoying heat haze that can unfortunately lead to blurry images, and nobody wants to come home with a bunch of not quite sharps. Extreme conditions are really best avoided, both for you and the birds, but if it is a hot day and you've managed to find a sneaky little water source on your satellite images, it's well worth staking that out in the morning or the afternoon as birds come down to drink. I've also had good success with these types of places in the middle of the day if you can avoid the glare and you are under a little bit of shade from the canopy. Now, speaking of bodies of water, if you're going anywhere near the ocean or tidal, make sure you check what the tides are doing. I recently got up before dawn, trekked all the way up this long beach, ready to cross this little estuary that I'd done plenty of times before, only to find that it was a king tide. There was no way I could get across. And by the time I trekked all the way back up the beach and found another location, I'd lost the good light and I went home without any shots. Now, if you're like me and you don't mind a little bit of a sleep in, fog, dew and frost are definitely your friends. I find the birds aren't up super early when the conditions are like this. Instead, they wait till the landscape is warming up or drying out a little bit. So if you're going a little bit later in the day, that's not going to work against you in this case. I do prefer birding in the morning, so that does mean a lot of early alarm starts for me, but I just don't seem to have much success in the afternoon. That might be different for you. Maybe it's just because my energy levels are higher in the morning, but I really like to get up early. I always think that the morning is the optimum time for birding. So another thing to consider is your apparel. I would avoid black, white and vivid prints and instead favour natural coloured clothing in mid-tones. I used to wear a lot of black and I still love black clothing, but I try and avoid it when I go birding because I saw my pet bird's reaction to the colour black. They really don't like it and it can scare them a little bit. I've had much better results since I became the queen of camo. If you do have a bright and sunny day forecast, it's really helpful to know the exact path of the sun rising and falling in relation to your location. It just saves you getting caught out being in the wrong spot. I use photo pills, but there's also Sunseeker, Sun Surveyor, Lumos and others, so download one and give it a try. I use the planner tool, I set the date and time, and then I can see exactly where I need to be before dawn. Now, if you found a location that's closer to urban areas, try and avoid places that are popular with dog walkers, cyclists and joggers. Birds, dogs and people are not a particularly good mix, and I've learnt my lesson from my local park run that's on every Saturday. It's at one of my favourite birding destinations, but it's no go on Saturdays. Okay, so you've checked out the landscape, you know what areas you're going to visit, you've found your sneaky trails, you've got your outfit sorted, it's time to go birding. But now I just want to run a little disclaimer here. Satellite images can be outdated, some of them as old as 10 years, so it pays to just be flexible when you get to the site, take a few moments to assess, and just be prepared to adapt and change your plan if you need to. So when I get to a site, if I see tall trees, I really try and avoid it. Often you can hear a lot of birds chirping in there, but they're really up high in the canopy. It's very hard to coax them down, and you get those awkward angled shots and blue sky in the background, which is a bit of a no-no. Instead, just stay on the fringe and wait for birds to emerge, or move to another area altogether where you have a more open view and you can see where birds are able to land. It's also a good idea to be on the lookout for flowering shrubs, seed pods, nuts, fruit, anything that birds might be feeding on. Often you can hear bickering in the distance, which is a surefire sign that you've got a group of birds chasing after a food source. The other thing to keep your ears open for is shrill warnings of different types of birds. That often means a bird of prey is approaching, so get ready quick with your settings and keep your eyes on the skies. You might just catch a bird in flight. Now, I'm a bit of a lone wolf and I prefer to go birding alone, but if you are with a friend or a group of other bird photographers, you're better to break up and meet up again later rather than travel as a pack. I also have a special walking technique that I use when I'm looking for birds. It's called the walk and pause. I take about 20 steps and then I stop and just have a little listen and a look around. Often I can't hear birds when I'm walking because of the crunching on gravel or on the ground, and it just gives you that opportunity to zone in a little bit more, tune into your surroundings and maybe see that bird that you've overlooked. Now, the only trouble with the walk and pause is that it's a surefire way to irritate the hell out of anyone who's going walking with you. So if you've got a friend with you, maybe skip the walk and pause until you're by yourself. Another thing to avoid is to walk towards a bird pointing the camera at it. And if I'm not quite in the right place or I need to get closer, I tend not to look at the bird. I look down or sideways and then I kind of creep past. If the sun's not in the right spot, sometimes I have to walk past the bird and then turn around and shoot back. But pointing the camera at the bird and walking towards it, it's quite intimidating and I don't find it's a very good tactic. Another little situation that can arise is you have the problem of too many birds. It's great when that happens, but you can do what I do and end up missing all of them by trying to chase more than one. I find it's better to focus on one species and just keep following that one bird rather than jumping between 2 or 3 different birds. You'll find that you end up with at least one good shot instead of missing them all, which is what I tend to do. Another technique I use is to stand in the shadow of the tree or even crouch down behind a tree. It's helpful to keep the sun from your eyes and also to keep a low profile while you're looking for birds. And now for my final tip, which is maybe a little bit cosmic, but it's really important, I think, to be present in the moment and not have your head elsewhere thinking about other things. Often I've gone birding with a busy mind and I'm thinking about something else, and I just find the birds pick up on that vibe and I don't really have any success. So if you arrive in that state where you've got something on your mind, just try and tune it out, take a few moments to center yourself before you go out birding, and imagine that your best shot is just around the corner. So that's a few of my favorite tips for now. If you have a great tip for birding, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. If you're an Instagram user, you can catch me at Flying Parrot Photography or visit my website flyingparrot.com.au. I am new to YouTube, but I have lots of great tips to share with you and I've got lots of exciting trips planned this year, so I look forward to sharing some of that with you. Bye for now.